Anyway, we want to give a quick shout out to Read2Me bedtime story series. This is very impromptu of us, but it's a real honor to be here because, well, as you know, we all teach. So we're accustomed with children and students of all ages. And doing this at this time is required, and we're real privileged to be part of it. So thanks again.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay, guys. So, welcome back, everyone, to Read2Me TT bedtime series. Hope you're all ready for another fun bedtime story. Yay! So, I'm Marie, and I sing.
I'm Phil. I play music in the band and sing too.
My name is Dax and I play the steel pan. I play guitar.
Great. Okay, kids. So we all know these past few weeks have had us inside, but just remember we all being heroes in our own way by staying inside and flattening the curve. You dig? So tonight's book is The Protector's Pledge by Daniel McLean. Now, this is a long book. So we'll be reading 2 chapters, and tomorrow brand new readers will pick up where we left off. You all ready?
Okay,
All right.
so before we begin, let's give you a short recap.
What is the recap?
We need to
Okay.
get the recap. Where's he? Okay.
So, let's get started.
So forget the recap then.
Do we go straight into reading the story?
Yeah.
All right. Let's go
Okay.
first.
So, we are continuing from chapter
5. We're on chapter 5 right now.
Give it to me, right?
Yes.
Okay. All was quiet in Alcavere. The first rays of sunlight were climbing over the hills, and the mist suspended above the ground and loosely wrapped around the trees was beginning to finally dissipate. Ordinarily, there would have been signs of life in the village by this time. Fishermen heading down to the shore or on the water casting their nets, farmers starting a long day's work in the fields, or a youngster cycling around delivering the daily newspaper. But today was different. Most of the villagers were asleep, having spent the night and early morning hours searching for Adele.
Okay.
She's singing.
So, JV was awake, and though more than 2 hours after overhearing what Miss Jean had said, there he was still sitting alone and puzzled on the front porch of the house, her cryptic words echoing in his head.
Put an accent.
She might just show up one of these days at the edge of the forest, like Mrs. B's boys. What on earth had she been talking about? Miss B, Granny B, was his flesh and blood, and he had lived with her all of his life. True, his personal story was a little less straightforward than other children's, but the suggestion that he had abandoned on the fringes of Oscuros was ridiculous. It was certainly no secret that he had been left in his grandmother's care when he was born, and that his parents had died before they could return for him. JV thought back to the very first time he had asked Granny B about them. He was 5 years old, had just started kindergarten, and had come home full of questions after a week of seeing young mothers and fathers collect his classmates at the end of each day. Where were his parents? Who were they? Why didn't he live with them? Confronted with the sudden interrogation, Granny B had pulled him up onto her chair and wrapped both arms around him. He had snuggled against her chest, inhaling the scent of the herbal potpourri that always accompanied her. Then she had launched into the first of many tales of her daughter and son-in-law, 2 restless souls whose love of excitement and adventure had drawn them out of Alcavere, and within a month, their native land.
Propelled by a force comprehensible only to them, they had traveled up north, up the archipelago of islands, and then traced the shores of the Caribbean Sea, southward through Central and South America. I hope you know your map. Their letters were filled with news of the wonderful things they had seen and reminders to Granny B to give JV 2 kisses on their behalf and to make sure he knew how much he was loved. These narratives became JV's favorite bedtime stories. As Granny B read, he was transported to an extraordinary place. Ruined pyramids of ancient civilizations, volcanic peaks, coral reefs, lush rainforests, and even a deep lake of liquid asphalt that, according to legend, had swallowed an entire Amerindian village. Although it had been a long time since Granny B had brought out the letters, he he remembered each one in vivid detail. Those letters had made it possible for him to tag along on his parents' travels, albeit vicariously, and were, in essence, his only link to the two wanderers whose lives were cut short by a violent hurricane. His parents' written messages had become his anchor, his roots, and undoubtedly the catalyst for his own hunger for adventure. And what's more, he realized they were just what he needed at the moment. With thoughts of losing himself in pages of dramatic accounts overshadowing all other concerns, JV rose, shook the pins and needles from his legs, and he entered the house. Granny B would be up by now.
Granny B, huh? Not surprisingly, he found her, Granny B, in the herb room. What was she doing there? She always said she did her best thinking there. JV wondered how long she had been tucked away in her retreat, humming, pondering, and keeping busy. Peering in, he saw that her back was to the half-open door, and she was grating a large avocado seed at the wooden counter that stretched from one end of the room to the other end. The rest of the fruit lay exposed, its firm yellow-green flesh facing upward like empty sockets now that the seeds were removed. Numerous glass jars sat on the shelves lining the walls, each neatly labeled and containing some part of the plant or tree that would inevitably find its way into one of Granny B's healing rubs, balms, oils, or teas.
Sip, sip.
In sharp contrast to the kitchen, this room was always kept meticulously clean and well ordered, with everything put and kept in its rightful place. Even the twef, what's that, that JB had picked the previous day.
Morning, Jason. Granny B said without turning around. I heard there was a search for Adele.
From Doris, no doubt, JV thought. He slid through the door and eased his way into the narrow room. How could you leave and not tell me anything? Granny B continued. You know how long I was up wondering about you. Oh gosh, sorry, Granny, JV said, hoping that he wouldn't be in too much trouble. It was late and I didn't want to wake you up.
She turned to him and with hand on hip and eyebrow up. Well, make sure you wake me up next time you're here. Yes, Granny. She turned back to the avocado seed. So no sign of Adele, eh? No, Granny, no luck. She's still missing. Well, I hope they find that child soon, she said, gratting steadily. Although something's not sitting too well with me about this whole affair, something's just not right. First she's sneaking out, then she's in punishment, and now she's gone. There's more in the mortar than the pestle, if you ask me. Mark my words, Jason. I have a feeling in my bones that there's somebody's not saying.
JV remembered that he had a similar feeling, to tell you the truth. And like his grandmother, he was bothered that he still couldn't put the pieces together. Anyhow, Granny B continued, hopefully someone will soon share whatever information they may have.
All right.
But in the meantime, I am sure Paulette and Earl aren't giving up on finding her.
No.
They'll also be trying to get a word in with the Mason if they have managed already. The mention of Adele's parents reminded JV of the purpose of his visit to the herb room. Granny, he asked quietly. Yes, Jason. Can I see the letters? She stopped her grating for a split second and then resumed. The letters? I haven't pulled those out in years. And don't you know, you have them all memorized from start to finish anyway, she said. But yes, I've never actually read them all for myself before. I was too young. She turned around and looked at JV. Well, they're packed away up on the shelf in my cupboard, and I'm not sure how easy it would be for you to dig them out. You really need them now?
Please, Granny. Granny B sighed, put down the grate and shuffled from the room. JV could hear her muttering to herself all the way down the corridor, then a thud of a stool being placed before the wardrobe. A groan as she stepped up onto it, followed by what sounded like packages being pushed and pulled. A few minutes passed. JV was getting restless. Can't you find them? Should I go and have a look myself? It was a quick thought, but he knew better than to entertain it. There were two places in the house that were off limits to him. The herb room. Under normal circumstances was one, and Granny B's cupboard. Under all circumstances was the other. But it still took an impressive amount of willpower to stay put, and he was on the verge of calling out when Granny B came through the door with a large shoebox in her hand. She rested it gently on the counter and went back to her greeting without a word.
Wow.
JV stepped closer and lifted the lid off the old box. Inside, lying across the rest of the contents, was a detailed map of the Caribbean and of the Americas. He looked at it briefly and put it aside, by doing so revealing two stacks of papers that were hidden underneath. One of magazine and newspaper clippings, and the other of loose white pages. Curious, he reached out for the clippings first. As he flipped through, a number of items grabbed his attention. Articles on the Soufre Hills eruption in Montserrat, a lost group of hikers in Puerto Rico's El Yunque rainforest, Harrison's Cave in Barbados, the Diamond Waterfall, and mineral baths of St. Lucia. 1 second, folks. I pressed the wrong part with my mouse.
No.
A Hindu temple in the Sea of Trinidad, and many others. JV smiled proudly to think that although he had never once left the village, all these places were familiar to him thanks to his parents. As with the map, he put the clippings aside and then turned his attention to the last thing left in the box, the stack of white pages, the letters.
Filled with anticipation, he reverently picked up the top page and turned it over so that he was looking at lines upon lines of blue writing. Sorry, I keep going off.
Yeah.
Small thing.
Yes. This is what he needed to put things into perspective, to reclaim his inner sense of harmony and balance, to remind him that no matter what obstacles and difficulties he faced,
Sorry again.
That's all right.
Guys, the mouse is super sensitive.
Yeah, it's pretty
Difficulties he faced.
and insecurities he had, There was a whole wide world out there filled with places, people, and things that he would someday see with his own eyes. He looked at the elegant cursive that filled the pages slanting right to left, and thought of how reassuring and yet curious it was that the penmanship should be so familiar. And then, in that instant, that it took to glance up at the labels on the jars and back down again to the letter, a terrible notion began to scratch at his subconscious until it painfully and skillfully, had savagely clawed through his conscious thought.
Unwillingly, as JV was to consider the intruding suspicion, he checked out the jar labels again. To his alarm, looped I's, H's, and F's, as well as ornate capital I's and E's, found their counterparts on a trembling page in his hands. He flipped through the sheets with increasing urgency. His heart raced as he saw that the handwriting on every last one was identical to that on the labels. It couldn't be true, but the proof was literally in his hands. JV's head reeled. There were no adventures in other lands, and no messages from his parents assuring him of their love. No proof that he was a prisoner that he had always thought himself to be. Probably nothing to tie his blood to this woman who had once again stopped greeting and was standing next to him. Her face a canvas of remorse, fear, sorrow, and pity, and no evidence to say that he was anything other than an orphan who had been abandoned on the fringe of the forest. As the full weight of all these realizations hit him, JV's hands went cold, and the pages slipped from his fingers. Unable to fully process the sudden onslaught of shock, grief, and anger, he was barely able to register Granny B's touch, steadily guiding him to the only chair in the room. Once seated, all he could do was stare blankly at the pages that he regarded mere seconds before as a sort of lifeline, now scattered across the floor. Well, thank you.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, what's going on is I'm reading the comments, trying to read the comments, see where the mouse is, read where she's reading. Make sure that I don't go out of focus, but we're having a blast. Let's continue. All right.
See, you are so many emotions.
Where's that?
Second line.
Right. So many emotions, questions, and accusations. Such a profound need to cry, yell, and then cry some more. The first 3 words that made it out of his mouth were profound in their simplicity. "Who am I?" he whispered. Not meeting his gaze, Granny bent down and started retrieving the pages. When she straightened up, she looked him directly in the eyes. "Who are you?" she repeated. Her voice was steady, her tone firm. "You are Jason Felix Theodore Valentine, a 12-year-old Form 2 student who does well in school, whose favorite subjects are geography and English, who has a healthy appetite, an even healthier sense of curiosity, and good, solid friends. But you were the baby who skipped crawling and went straight to walking, who said his first real word before he had a single tooth in his mouth. The boy who can probably name every plant on this island and knows something about most of the countries in our part of the world. You are the same person who made a special Christmas card last year for lonely old Pa Gregory and who just spent the whole night and early morning hours looking for a little girl who may be lost in the forest." Granny B built up steam and her eyes were flashing. "You are Jason Felix Theodore Valentine. You can question your origins and the identity of your parents. You have a right to, and you should. But don't you ever question who you are." Ducks.
That's deep. Fat tears began to roll down JV's cheeks. He could barely find his voice. "So it's true then, what Miss Jean said about me, that I was found at the edge of the forest?" Granny B rested the jumble of pages on the counter, turned to face JV once again, and leaned back. She took a deep breath and began. "It was November the 2nd, All Souls. The darkness that wraps itself around Alcavere at night, almost swallowing our tiny village whole, was driven away that evening. Every doorstep and wall was lit with candles, each one to remind us of someone we had lost. And the cemetery, oh, the cemetery, was like a shining city, ablaze with flambeaux and countless candles on gravestones, columns, and shrines. They were even on the paths between the graves, standing like lines of sentinels of various heights and colors. And the air was heavy, and the scent of all the flowers, hibiscuses, orchids, roses, ginger lilies, bunches of them adorning, and the final resting place of the soul of my many neighbors and friends. It was getting late, and only a few of us were still there at the graveyard, despite the hour of a night like that, when dupies, jumbies, and other spirits are roaming around free. Oh gosh. Yes, I remember it as if it was yesterday. Miss Jean, not too far away, bowing over her husband's dead headstone, her fingers working the rosary beads. Harry Vera Talbot, who had just buried the firstborn the day before, standing as still as statues in front of the little grave where the earth was still and fresh, and a small group making its exit under the wrought iron arches. Everything was quiet, real quiet.
Murray.
Then I heard it, carried on the night breeze that was tugging at the flames. I heard the faintest wail, like the meow of a kitten. Scanning the cemetery, the only movement I saw, the flickering shadows cast by the candlelight. Tired and ready to leave, I was about to pass under the arches myself when I heard it again, but this time louder, more insistent. Definitely not the cry of a kitten. I looked back at Miss Jean and knew that she had heard it too. She was standing, clutching the rosary in both hands, her eyes wide. The Talbots had also heard the sound and were craning their necks this way and that, trying to figure out where it had come from.
Why is that?
Of the four of us, Miss Jean was the first to say something. "Duppy's out tonight, you hear it?" And as if right on cue, we heard another long, plaintive cry. "But that sounds like a child, a baby," Vera said. She grabbed hold of her husband and stared down at the grave before them, perhaps thinking of what she would have given to hear her own daughter's voice again. Then Miss Jean stepped closer. "You don't see? That's what those evil spirits want you to think," she explained. "That's it, some little child you're hearing. So that you go out looking, and bam! They grab you and carry you off." But Harry wasn't having any of it. He sucked his teeth and said, "That is a set of nonsense, Jean, and you know it.
You hear me?
Don't be scaring Vera like that." That ain't no duppy child or duppy pretend to be a child. Just an animal out there in the forest. I don't know about the two of you, but we're heading home.
Harry and Vera started walking past me on their way out to the cemetery with Miss Jean close behind. And they had almost cleared the arches when I had called after them. But if it really is a child, we can't leave out here, right? Right? All right. They're going to kill me here tonight. But they didn't pay me any mind. Go home, Miss V, Harry shouted back. And then Miss Jean yelled, I hope you remembered to put rice around your house so the duppies don't fall inside, you stupid. I could still hear her going on about the spirits, her voice fading as they got far away. Then just like that, I was alone. Granny B paused, her eyes staring off into the distance. JV sat as still as stone, barely breathing. So what happened next, he managed to ask. Well, duppy or not, I had to check things out. I listened again for the cry and left the graveyard through the side gate facing the forest. You know what I'm talking about? There wasn't a star in the sky, and the night was so dark that even with all the light from the cemetery and village, I could just barely make my way along the path to Oscuros. I went slowly, stopping each time. I heard the sound to make sure I was heading in the right direction. Walk, stop, walk, stop, until I was too tired to take another step. So I sat where I was and gave my old legs a rest. The minutes passed and I listened for the cry, but only heard the steady chirp of invisible frogs and crickets, their songs interrupted by occasional squeaks from bats flying overhead. I still wasn't sure of what I was going to find, or truth be told, what would find me. You dig? It wasn't until a jumbie bird hooted its ominous call predicting the death of someone nearby that I definitely knew I was following the cries of an infant, not a cunning spirit, and that I needed to get to the child soon. But where was it? Panicking, I said the fastest and most important prayer of my life. One more sound, little one, just one more, and I will find you. Don't give up on me yet. Granny B looked tenderly at JV. He was sitting with his feet up on the chair, arms around his legs, and chin resting on his knees. She went on.
No sooner than the last word had passed my lips than I heard a short whimper coming from somewhere just ahead. I started walking again, but this time with a fresh sense of purpose. Oscuros loomed before me, and although... Hold on.
1 second. Loom before me. Sorry.
Right, loom before me, and although I had made up my mind to enter it if necessary, I really hoped I wouldn't have to do that unthinkable thing and go in the forest on All Souls Night. No way. Then, just mere feet from the first stand of trees, something on the ground by the bush of the side caught my eye. I went across. It was a triangle of white cloth hanging over the edge of the basket. I peered into the basket and I saw that the rest of the cloth was swaddled around a little body, leaving only a little brown round face exposed. Your sweet angelic face, Jason. But your eyes were closed and you were deathly still. Fearing that I was too late, I picked you up, put my finger under your nose and hoped for a sign of life. I have never known such relief as when I felt those steady wisps of warm air. I stood there for a few minutes, holding you close, then put you in my basket and brought you home. Granny B sighed, shaking her head slowly. Believe me, Jason boy, despite my best efforts, I never learned where you have come from or how you ended up on the forest. All I know is that we didn't give up on each other that night and that I have loved you as you were my very own ever since.
Silence reigned as Granny B's words hung in the air. JV hid his face behind his knees, and the only movement he made was to raise an arm to wipe away a tear. The minutes ticked by. When he finally spoke, he did so in a muffled voice. And the letters? You made up all those stories, wrote them down, and pretended they were for my parents. Why did you lie? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I'm sorry, Jason, she replied wearily. Perhaps I was wrong, but how would you tell a 5-year-old that he had been abandoned? How would you explain to him that even Though one life had left him behind, it wasn't the end of the world because another had embraced him with open arms. And then he had become the single most important person to an old woman who had never had children of her own, but who knew from the moment she just held him in her arms and felt his heart against hers that he was where he should be, that he was home, she asked. I knew I would have to explain things to you somehow, someday. But when you came home with all these questions, they caught me off guard, and I thought I had more time than I did. And I wasn't prepared. So instead of telling you the truth, I created a story. One that took a 5-year-old's mind off his parents' absence and created an outlet for his brilliant imagination. One that made him look out and not in. One that prodded him to eagerly await the possibilities of the future rather than brood over the misfortunes of the past.
JV thought of all the nights he had listened to those stories that had shaped his childhood, and remembered lying in bed imagining himself as an explorer, longing for the day when he could retrace his parents' footsteps throughout the Caribbean. But now that he knew the truth, his happiest memories seemed absurd, and he couldn't help feeling as though he had lost everything, even his dreams. How could things have changed so abruptly, and how could Granny B, if you could even call her that anymore, expect him to feel the same person? Suddenly he was exhausted. The recent revelations, together with his lack of sleep, had taken their toll, and at that moment there was nothing more he could think to ask, nothing else he wanted to know. He got up slowly from the chair and looked past the grey, hunched old lady as he headed to the door. She was saying something else as he left, something about love, the true meaning of family, and unbreakable bonds. But he was too tired to listen, too sad to even care. Maybe, just maybe, if he laid down and closed his eyes, his bad dream would be over, and he could be JV once again. JV the explorer,
Yes.
JV the adventurer.
Yes.
Chapter 6, Making Amends. Dax, as you.
All right. All right. The first beads of rain came tentatively, escaping the swollen charcoal gray clouds and falling down, down until finally hitting the thirsty soil, where they were devoured so quickly that their fleeting existence went mostly unnoticed. But the villagers, whose gazes had been upturned for more than a month waiting for the prolonged dry spell to come to an end finally, saw the skies burst open, could not miss the fatter, more confident drops that followed, pinging on the galvanized roofs like crisp, dulcet notes from 1,000 steel pans. Eager faces appeared at windows, peering out as the plump drops became long, wet cords seemingly connected the heavens to the earth, and in no time at all, the children of Alcavere were streaming outside to splash in the newly formed puddles. The rainy season had arrived at last.
We need that.
But by the end of the second straight day of continuous showers, the joy of receiving such abundant rainfall had begun to fade. Villagers watched uneasily as roadside gutters overflowed and water crept ever closer to their front steps. They shook their heads in dismay when they glanced over the scorched hillsides that had only endured 7 months of unrelenting heat, but had also suffered further abuse because of indiscriminate burning. Knowing it was too late to reverse the damage, the people of Alcavere could only hope that the loose soil did not slip down the slopes and would bury them all under thick layers of dense mud. Apart from the threat of flooding, another unfortunate effect of the rain was that any clues relating to Adele's whereabouts that may have been missed were forever washed away, making the odds of finding her steeper yet. But even so, no effort that could lead to her return was spared in those first 72 hours. That was long. Uniformed detectives had come from Landing Town, taken statements, conducted a thorough inspection of the village, and left. Flyers bearing a picture of a smiling girl with 2 shoulder-length braids found their way to neighboring towns, and a few stout souls had even tried to search Oscuros again, only to give up, disheartened, soon afterward.
What else could be done? No one dared say it openly, but JV knew that the villagers were losing any hope of finding the little girl. with the bright eyes and a ready smile. And Adele's parents, having exhausted all conceivable avenues in the quest to find their daughter, and at a loss as to what more they could possibly do, Paulette and Earl de Coto remained at home, receiving solemn-faced visitors and marking time until Mason's return. JV wondered at Mason's continued absence, but the rumors swirling through the village, which had reached JV's ears during one of Doris's visits with Granny B, was that Mason had been in touch and was still in Landing Town, trapped in a part of the capital that was inundated by flood waters. His promise to return to Alcavere as soon as he could was apparently his parents' last ray of hope. They told everyone who stopped by that Mason would not rest until his sister was found. Hey. The following day brought no new word on Adele, but was accompanied by two positive developments. The first was that, to everyone's relief, the weather at last seemed to settle in the familiar rainy season pattern of bright blue sunny mornings that only lapsed into a downpour around mid-afternoon. Yeah, very nice. The second was that JV, who had been ensconced in his room, had barely spoken a word to Granny B since she had told him the truth about his past, had finally decided to emerge from his self-imposed seclusion. The pull of the forest had intensified. Plus, he had done a lot of thinking over the past 3 days. Though the reality of his origin still stung, he recognized that there was a lot for which he had to be grateful. What would have happened, for instance, if Granny B hadn't found him on that All Souls night and adopted him as her own? Pressure. How much longer would he have lasted out there before succumbing to the elements or becoming a tasty morsel for one of the wild animals that prowled through the forest? Reflecting on his life thus far, he saw that he had been well loved and taken care of and had wanted for nothing. It was time to stop moping.
JV opened his bedroom door and stepped out into the corridor. Yeah! Expecting to find Granny B sipping tea at the table, he went to the kitchen but only found Knocket taking a mid-morning nap at her perch, standing on one leg with her head turned backward and her beak nestled under her wing.
Back as that part.
Oh, I love this. He approached the window and peered through. The plants looked rejuvenated, and glistening water droplets made him think that a world that had been washed sparkling clean from the many mountains of dust. Everything seemed to shine, everything that is, except for Granny B's car, which was still parked in its usual spot and plastered with mud-splattered leaves from the soursop tree. Soursop tree. What am I saying?
That's right.
He was thinking just how much work would be needed for all the stuff of when a slow rhythmic cracking caught his attention. Stepping outside, he immediately hit the heavy smell. He was hit by this heavy smell of wet earth. It wasn't an unpleasant odor, but a little overwhelming for a nose that had been shut up indoors for many days.
Amazing, isn't it? Granny B asked from her rocker. Too little rain, then too much. Even Mother Nature has a hard time getting things right sometimes. JV knew Granny B too well not to understand the hidden meaning behind her words. Although her apology was indirect, it had the same effect on him as if she had jumped up in mid-rock, clasped her hands together, and begged for his forgiveness. Well, she's only human after all, he responded, recognizing that all was forgiven between them. They shared a smile. Do you know that I was this close to running away the other day? He mentioned a few moments later, holding up his thumb and index finger and showing Granny B the small space between the two. What? In all that rain? Yeah, well, I really didn't think about that part. I thought I could go looking for my parents, or at least try to find out more about them somehow. Where were you going to start? JV shrugged. So what happened? Why did you change your mind? Well, I figured I'd stick around a little while longer, since you're not getting any younger and need someone looking after. Well, that's real nice of you, Jason, and I sure appreciate it, Granny B said. JV could see she was trying her best to stifle a laugh. I've certainly raised a true gentleman, haven't I? She patted his hand and then looked up at the sky. Nice and bright today, eh? Some real good sunshine out here. Would be a shame to waste this nice morning sun. She glanced at the car.
Yep. I've got lots to do before the rain starts up again, Granny. Like go check on Carol and Pascal I haven't had a chance to see them since we went exploring and, well, remembering his bad behavior toward his friends, he bowed his head and studied the ground. And you have something important you need to tell me then, don't you? Granny B concluded. Yes. Plus, I'm not done exploring Oscuros. I thought about what you said, and there's still a lot I want to see and discover. But instead of following in my imaginary parents' footsteps, I'll just make my own. He paused and caught Granny B stealing another glance at the car. Once those footsteps don't go past the breadfruit tree, she said, watching him carefully. JV felt his chest tighten. Yeah, lots to do, so I better get started, especially since it's going to take me a while to get that to look anything close to how it should. He pointed at the muddy mess under the soursop tree and scampered off to find a bucket and hose. That's us.
Almost 3 hours later, JV was on his way to Carol and Pascal's house. He was in a good mood. He had not only made up with Granny B, but he had also had a belly full of crab and caldo, rice
Yummy.
and fried plantains, all washed down with a tall glass of cold Moby.
Yeah.
Nice, right? Cleaning the old cortina had been exercise enough, but after a meal like that, he was ready to walk. The weather was holding up nicely, and once he had apologized to Carol and Pascal and was back on their good side, he planned to take them to the clearing in the forest where he had seen the mysterious lady. As he neared his destination, he saw Miss Pearson outside sweeping her garden path. He approached the gate, and when she looked up and pressed her mouth into a hard line of seeing him, he knew he wasn't exactly in her good books. She stopped her sweeping, held onto her broom and with one hand, and placed the other on the hip. "Good afternoon, Miss Sandra," he said. "Jason," her reply. Are Carol and Pascal at home?" One of her eyebrows shot up, and her face creased into a scowl. "I don't think," she began. But then a cheery voice called her from the large bay window overlooking the yard. "Hiya, JV," Pascal shouted, waving enthusiastically. Failing to hide her exasperation, Miss Pearson took a deep breath and instructed JV to wait where he was, which he did while he watched her march up the path, up the front porch steps, and then into the house. Pascal's face disappeared from the window moments later. In the minutes that followed, JV prepared his apology, deciding that short and sweet would be the best way to go. Humbling himself before Carol would be painful enough without having to drag on and on. He had rehearsed what he was going to say at least 3 times, and was just beginning to think that perhaps Miss Pearson was going to let them come out to see him when the door had opened, and Carol appeared with a considerably less exuberant Pascal in tow.
"What's up, JV?" she asked, dryly, as she approached the gate. "You know, if you keep biting your nails like that, you won't have any left." JV hastily clasped his hands behind his back. I just wanted to pass by and tell you and Pascal that I shouldn't have left you alone to find your way out of the forest the other day. I'm really sorry. I hope it wasn't too difficult to get out." Pascal's head jerked up and he opened his mouth as if to say something. But before he could get a word out, Cal grabbed his arm and jumped in. "You should be sorry, JV. That was not cool. Not cool at all. We actually did run into some trouble, you know." "Yeah, we found our way out in the end, though, didn't we?" She snapped at Pascal, giving him a sharp look. "Well, I'm just glad you got home all right," JV added. Cal relaxed a bit and appeared to consider things for a couple of seconds. Apology accepted, she finally yielded. "But don't ever let it happen again." "Friends?" JV asked, extending his hand. "Yeah, friends," she smiled. "Wait."
Oh, my hand. Yeah.
Thrusting her free one out and giving JV a firm shake. Now that the unpleasant part was taken care of, JV had other matters to discuss. He looked her in the eyes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I've been thinking it over, and there's something else that I've decided I should tell you, he said, lowering his voice. Carol leaned in just the slightest bit. "Yes," she responded, her eyes widening. "Well, you're not going to believe this. I mean, I hardly believe it myself, but..." "But what, JV?" The faintest of smiles was beginning to tug at the corners of her mouth. "Well," he continued, "the strangest thing happened after you guys left Oscuros. I saw this woman or girl, I'm not really too sure, but because I couldn't see her that well, but... Huh? Carol interrupted, her face falling. What woman? What girl? She took a step back. Well, JV hesitated, momentarily thrown off by his friend's reaction. Pascal, no longer able to contain himself and taking advantage of his sister's discomposure and JV's bewilderment, blurted out, "We saw her too, and her friends, right? They had their feet, right? Right. But poor Pascal, that was about all he managed to say, but before Carol recollected herself and shushed him up. Thoroughly confused, JV was about to ask a few questions of his own when Mrs. Pearson, who had been keeping a close eye on things under the guise of sweeping the steps and porch, signaled that it was time for Carol and Pascal to return indoors. Clearly, she thought that the visit had gone on long enough. "Wait," JV said, before they turned to leave. From the look of things, it didn't seem like he'd be able to take them to the clearing that day, but at least they could make plans for the next morning. "Want to take another trip with me tomorrow if there's no rain?" he asked, imagining their faces when they saw the glade. "Are you kidding?" Carol shot back. There was disbelief in her eyes, but also a hefty dose of fear. "We're not going anywhere near Oscuros. There's no way our parents would let us go, boy." For one thing, they were really angry when we got home late last night. We're actually still grounded because of it. And for another, Mummy hasn't let us out of her sight since Adele disappeared. She nodded toward the house where Mrs. Pearson had given up the broom as a prop and was now standing with both hands on her hips and glowering down at them. "There's just no way. Sorry." Carol turned away from JV, unwilling to test the limits of her mother's patience any longer. "And if you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from Oscuros too. Yeah, watch out for the..." "Oh, hush, Pascal," she said. With that, the visit was brought to an end, and JV watched in disappointment as Carol ushered her brother up the path before her.
All right.
Guys, we didn't even know we were done, but it was going good. The only thing is my hand was hurting with the mouse. I was cramped.
And I was sweating.
Yeah. So, all right. We hope everybody enjoyed. Kids, if you're asleep, amen. But I hope they enjoyed it. I'm sure James had enjoyed it too. That's her nephew. He's awesome.
Yeah.
So, where are we going, Roy? Right here?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cartar one.
Read Cartar one and then...
Thanks again for joining us for Read to Me's Rightly Bedtime Series. Nightly. Hope you had fun reading with us.
But before we go, it is really very important that you listen to us. Are you listening?
You sure?
Do you want to be little superheroes? Here's what you can do to help. Wash your hands, keep your hands out of your mouths, and remind Mummy and Daddy, Granny, everybody to wear their masks. If they are going out, you can even make a game out of it and sing happy birthday twice while you wash your hands with water and soap.
We can do this. Why? Because we are in this together. See you tomorrow, kiddies, for a brand new story with 2 new readers. Everybody, God bless. Thank you for tuning in. Bedtime Stories, we want to say thank you to you for including us in the series. It's been fun. We've never ever done this. And we hope to do this more because it's vibes and we want to give back. God bless everybody. All right.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.